Greetings, friends and fellow freelancers. Welcome to another episode of Tabletop Mercenary. This week, I want to talk about one of the two inevitables we all have to deal with, because everyone dies and everyone has to pay taxes. And taxes can be a thing that really blindsides you if you are working as a TTRPG creator, if you're in this space, and you don't really account for them when it comes time to fill out all your information at the end of the year. Now, most normal people, you're working a 9-to-5 job, you're working a salary job, you're familiar with taxes. You've probably been paying them most of, if not all, of your adult life. The way it works in these jobs is your boss, your company, whoever it is, automatically deducts your taxes. Then at the end of the year, you fill out your tax information and you let the IRS know all of the various activities you had going on. The IRS then sees, we overcharged you, and they give you back a tax refund. Or, in some cases, they find out, no, this is the proper amount of tax that we took from you, everything is square. In some rare instances, you might actually owe more in taxes, so you have to cut them a check and move on with your life. However, if you are a freelancer, no one takes out taxes for you automatically. When you are paid by your boss, that is just a lump sum payment for the work that you did. So unless you are an official employee of somewhere like Paizo, Wizards of the Coast, Onyx Path, and this is your 9-to-5 clock in, clock out, you're the one who has to keep track of what taxes you owe, and you're responsible for paying them. And if you're not accounting for that, that can be a huge issue for you when the year is over. And the more money you make, the higher a tax bracket that'll put you in, and the more money you're going to have to owe, which can be a problem if you haven't set the cash aside to make sure that, the king's wolves don't come to your door. As an example, for folks who think this might not be that big of a deal, I, as a TTRPG professional, usually pay $300 to $400 a year extra in taxes because I claim a lot of business expenses. We will get to that in a moment. But as regular viewers know, I had a successful Kickstarter a while back, and I got my check for it last year for Army Men. I earned an extra $3,000 or so because of that Kickstarter, and I set it aside in my savings account, and I didn't touch it, which was very wise of me because that earning, despite my best efforts, put me in a different tax bracket. So now instead of cutting a $300 to $400 check, I have to cut a $1,700 check. And that is a squeeze I'm feeling, so that's obviously why taxes are at the forefront of my mind for this video, and why I want to try and save as many people out there as much pain as possible when it comes to this topic. Because the more money you make, the more money you're going to owe at the end of the year, and if you're not prepped for it, oh boy, it can be an issue. But I mentioned business expenses. And this is what is going to be your saving grace. It is the thing you are going to want to min-max the hell out of to make sure you keep as much of your earnings and your loot in your pocket as possible. And the name is pretty self-explanatory, but it can cover so much more than people think. As an example, a business expense is something that you had to spend money on in order to keep your business rolling. In order to do your job, you needed to spend money on this thing. Now, let's take a very easy example and say that I was paid $100 to write a supplement for, Changeling the Lost. But the particular mechanics I needed to write this supplement, let's say I was doing something for entitlements, required me to purchase another book so that I had those mechanics on hand and I could use them. Because I needed that book, let's say I paid $25 for it. So I was paid $100, but I have a $25 expense. So as far as the government is concerned, only $75 of what I was paid is payment, because I had this expense in the middle, and that gets deducted from the overall cost. So you have your column of earnings, your column of expenses, you subtract your expenses and deductions from your earnings, and that gives you a new, smaller number that now gets taxed. Now, the key here is to make sure that you claim as many legitimate expenses as possible, and that you keep good track of them. And this is a thing that lots of folks I have talked to over the years, they academically know, but they fall off the wagon and they forget, and they don't keep their receipts, they don't keep their records. And then at the end of the year, they're kicking themselves because there are hundreds to thousands of dollars that they spent over the year that they now have to pay taxes on because they forgot to keep their receipts. The other part of it is you could be very creative with how you keep things in mind. As an example, one of my biggest tax expense, or one of my biggest business expenses over the years, has been going to conventions, because conventions, as anyone knows, are expensive. And even just going as an attendee, not even running a booth and selling books, you have your badge cost, your hotel cost, your travel costs, all of those things. As long as you are at something that is part of your profession and that you are actively doing business networking at of one form or another, that counts as a business expense. So as I live in Indiana, it's a reasonable thing I might do. And I have the $500 that I chip in for the hotel that I stay at with folks. I have the several $100s for the badge that I get. I have all the food expenses while I'm there. All of those things, as long as I am attending events, talking to fellow professionals, if I have, if I go to, the Ennies and I just hobnob and network with people, this is my industry and this is an important event to attend. Therefore, I could claim all of those things as business expenses. As I mentioned earlier, if I need to buy RPG books because I'm working on a project, all of those things are business expenses because I need those materials. I might also use them to play the RPG because I enjoy playing it in my free time, but I still need it for my business. Even really small things. As an example, for those who saw the commercial, Dubby is a delicious little thing that I enjoy drinking. Yeah, code for all this at the end of it, for those who are curious. But in order to make the video, in order to try it, I had to get a sample of it. And so before I could hawk it, I had to spend that money to get a sample of the drink. And so I could write that, what I spent on that, on my taxes. And it gets longer and longer and longer the more you do. For instance, if I want to get a new microphone, I want to upgrade my audio equipment, I want to get a new camera, the banner behind me that I take to conventions and put on my table and it shows up in my videos. All of these things are business expenses, even including stuff like if I need to buy a new pack of pens, if I need to get a hold of maps to run games at a con, if I am going to be a professional GM and I buy minis and I invest in even things like software, of the editing software I use for these videos. I recently upgraded it last year, which is why I have some fun new effects. That's a good $60, $70 a year that I'm spending just to keep that service going. That is also a business expense. And it might not seem that big of a deal of $10 here, $20 there, $35 because you wanted to go out to lunch with, one of your colleagues, or you wanted to go out to, talk about the podcast you're working on or try to recruit somebody for, this project you're working on. Those are also business expenses. And at the end of the year, it is surprising as hell how much money you spend or how many things you do that you can write off on your taxes and you really shouldn't be charged for. But if you don't bring your receipts, if you don't have a way of proving that you spent this, it can get dicey. So that is my recommendation to anyone who is out there, whether you're thinking about becoming a TTRPG professional or you're already in the field and you're not doing this. Please ask for receipts, get a file going, make sure that you have your times and your dates and you know exactly what you're spending, because it makes a huge difference at the end of the year. And even what I mentioned for my recently increased bill, I can only imagine how much higher that would have been if I hadn't claimed thousands of dollars in donations and business expenses. Because, oh boy, it adds up quickly, and you need as many defenses as you can get to make sure that you can get by and keep as much of, your earnings as possible, because we're already not paid enough, and I don't want anyone out there to miss out on the opportunity to keep something they might very much need. But that is our practical topic for the week. I am not a tax expert. For anyone who is in the Northwest Indiana area who is looking to get into RPGs, or maybe you're also a freelancer, I have put the information from my tax preparer below. Please check her out. She is amazing. She does great work, and I can only imagine how hosed I would be if she had not helped me out with this. She is not sponsored, by the way. I'm just trying to help out folks who help me out. But if you have any other questions that I can answer, I will do my best to attempt to do so. If I don't have an answer, please direct your tax questions toward the professionals. And again, I have not done my own taxes in over a decade. Everything that I earn is so messy and so complicated, and I work for a dozen people a year. It's just easier to pay the fee and let a professional do it. That is my last piece of advice. But if you have any other questions, or if there's any other topics you'd like to see me cover in the future on this particular show, please let me know. I will do my best to add them to the list and get them covered. But since we're coming up on the date, I also wanted to remind everyone, pay your taxes this year and start preparing for next year's time, because you have a whole year, and it's important to get on your routine now so that when this comes around again, you are fully prepared for it. But that's all for this week, and this is your Tabletop Mercenary, signing off. First and foremost, thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Tabletop Mercenary. If there's a question you have about being an RPG creator, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments below so I can address it in a future episode. If you want to help me keep the lights on and keep this show going, then please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and giving it a share on your own social media pages to help boost the signal. Lastly, if you really enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a tip by buying me a Ko-fi or becoming a Patreon patron at the links in the video description below. You'll find me on both sites under the name The Literary Mercenary.